Usually, when you look at a map of the world, there's this expectation of, I guess, permanence, like geology.
Mm.
You point to a landmass, you see a country's bold name, and you just assume that's how it has always been.
Right, yeah, we inherently trust the map makers. I mean, it's comforting to have borders settled and visible and just, neatly categorized.
Exactly. But if you zoom in on the heart of Eurasia, to a region that's roughly the size of Western Europe, suddenly that map isn't a record of geography at all. It's actually an active, heavily disputed battlefield.
It really is.
And in fact, if we look at the stack of documents we're diving into today is Saturday, April 4th, 2026, by the way, and welcome to you, the learner, to another deep dive. The map is the very first thing they tell us we need to correct.
Yeah, we're unpacking a dense, highly detailed, and frankly, a really heavy narrative today concerning East Turkestan, the Uyghur people, and their relationship with the People's Republic of China.
Yeah. And, well, before we get into it, we need to frame how we are approaching this material. I want to state this explicitly for you listening. These sources present a very specific, politically charged perspective, primarily from the viewpoint of the East Turkestan government in exile.
Right. And it's important to note that neither of us here are taking sides, nor are we, endorsing these viewpoints.
Exactly. We are impartially reporting on the factual claims and the arguments contained exactly within this provided source material. Our goal today is just simply to help you understand the mechanics of this specific narrative.
We're really just examining the architecture of their argument based solely on the documents provided to us.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mm.
Because we are talking about an argument that spans, thousands of years of history, trillions of dollars in global natural resources, and harrowing allegations of an ongoing systematic genocide affecting millions.
Yeah, it's a massive scale.
It is. And to understand the headlines we see today, the sources insist we have to start with the legal and historical status of the land itself.
Right, because that is the foundational premise of the entire stack of documents. Before we can analyze the atrocities they allege are happening today, we have to establish where we are, legally speaking.
Legally speaking, yeah.
The sources fundamentally reject the Chinese narrative that this region has always been part of the Zhonghua Minzu, or the Chinese nation. China officially calls the region Xinjiang, which translates tellingly to new territory or colony.
Colony.
Yeah. And the documents argue that East Turkestan is not a province at all, but a sovereign nation currently under occupation.
And they back that up using the 1933 Montevideo Convention, which is like the international standard for statehood.
Exactly.
They trace their native Turkic and Indo-European roots back over 6,400 years, establishing a permanent population. They have a defined territory of over 1.8 million square kilometers.
Which is huge, by the way.
It's massive. And they note that right before 1949, they had a functioning government backed by a 40,000-troop national army. Plus, historically, earlier iterations of their state were officially recognized by major powers, like the British, Russian, and Ottoman empires.
So by hitting those four criteria, they are actively dismantling the concept of terra nullius, the legal doctrine of unclaimed land that empires historically used to justify colonization.
Oh, wow.
They are stating, legally, that the events of October 12, 1949 were not a peaceful liberation by the People's Liberation Army, as claimed, but a premeditated, belligerent military occupation.
And the details of that 1949 invasion are, well, they're staggering. The documents allege that just 2 months prior to the Chinese army crossing the border, the Soviet Union actually helped assassinate over 30 senior officials of the East Turkestan Republic.
Right. It outlines a coordinated geopolitical decapitation strike. If you wipe out the core leadership immediately before invasion, you completely neutralize the state's ability to mount a unified defense.
I want to pause on a detail here because reading their counter to the Chinese historical claims brought up an analogy that really struck me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the sources basically say that China claiming East Turkestan just because the Manchu King Empire conquered it centuries ago is like a bit like Egypt trying to claim Australia today simply because both of them were once part of the British Empire.
That is, wow. That perfectly illustrates the absurdity of stretching territorial claims across centuries of imperial history.
Right. But then there's this massive discrepancy in the demographics that the sources point out. And I have to admit, I really struggled with this one.
It's a confusing part of the data.
Yeah. So the official Chinese statistics claim there are around 13.5 million Turkic people in the region today. But these documents estimate the true number is actually over 40 million. Wait, how can a census be off by over 26 million people? I mean, in a modern, high-tech surveillance state, how do the sources justify a gap that massive?
Well, what's fascinating here is it sounds impossible on its face, but the sources argue this is a deliberate bureaucratic suppression.
Okay, how so?
Think about it. If a state admits to having a concentrated, ethnically distinct population of 40 million people in one specific region, the optics of labeling them a mere minority group fall apart.
Oh, because a population of that size constitutes a nation.
Exactly. By officially suppressing the census numbers, the state artificially makes the native population appear small, fragmented, and therefore an internal domestic issue rather than a colonized people.
So it's about controlling the narrative on the global stage. If it's just a small, rebellious province, it's an internal counterterrorism affair and international law stays out of it.
Yes, precisely.
But if it's an occupied sovereign country of 40 million people, then the international laws of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions apply.
The legal distinction changes the entire rulebook of how the world is allowed to respond.
Wow. So if we establish that this land isn't historically theirs, according to the documents, the obvious question is, why risk international condemnation to take in the first place? Why hold on to it with such a massive military presence?
Well, the documents pivot here from legal theory to harsh geopolitical reality. The motivation is almost entirely economic and strategic.
And this is where the story connects directly to you, listening to this right now.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just about drawing lines on an obscure map. This is about the supply chains powering the modern world.
It absolutely is.
Geopolitically, East Turkestan borders 8 different countries. It acts as the absolute anchor for China's Belt and Road Initiative. The documents heavily emphasize the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, which gives China a direct overland route to the Arabian Sea via a port in Pakistan.
We should probably explain the strategic value of that corridor. Currently, a massive percentage of China's energy imports and trade floats through the Strait of Malacca, which is a narrow maritime choke point near Singapore.
Right.
In the event of a global conflict, a rival navy could easily blockade that strait, which would effectively cripple the Chinese economy in weeks. The route through East Turkestan entirely bypasses that vulnerability. It is an overland insurance policy for the survival of the empire.
That makes total sense. And the resources buried inside East Turkestan are just as vital. We're talking about 30% of China's total onshore oil reserves, 34% of its natural gas, and an estimated 450 billion tons of proven coal reserves.
It's astronomical wealth.
Yeah, the sources value all of this at nearly $60 trillion. They just opened the 4th phase of the West-East gas pipeline, moving 15 billion cubic meters of gas annually straight to China's eastern megacities. It's a 1,745-kilometer pipeline.
But the leverage extends far beyond fossil fuels. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the documents note this region supplies over 90% of China's cotton.
Which is huge for the apparel industry.
Yes. But even more critically, it produces roughly 45% of the entire world's supply of polysilicon.
Wait, polysilicon is what we use for solar panels, right?
Exactly. It is the foundational material for manufacturing solar tech. The sources are highlighting a massive geopolitical vulnerability here. As the global economy aggressively pushes for a green energy transition, the demand for solar power is skyrocketing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by controlling almost half the world's raw material required for those panels, the occupying state holds immense leverage over the global climate agenda.
That is wild. Plus, they have the world's largest deposits of beryllium, which is essential for advanced tech and aerospace engineering. So to secure all of this, the region is heavily militarized.
It has to be.
Yeah, the sources describe a massive fortified launch pad featuring the People's Liberation Army, the armed police, and a paramilitary force called the XPCC that is 2.7 million people strong.
Which is just a staggering number of personnel.
It is. And it's also where they conducted 46 nuclear tests at the Lopner base. The documents allege those tests caused an estimated 750,000 deaths from radiation exposure over the decades.
The sheer economic and strategic value of East Turkestan explains the ruthless calculus we are about to discuss. The reliance on these pipelines, these minerals, and these trade routes means the state cannot tolerate any internal resistance. To secure the Belt and Road, absolute, unquestioned control is a prerequisite.
Which introduces a dark, terrifying logic. I mean, if the region is too strategically valuable to ever lose, how do you guarantee you keep it forever?
You erase the resistance.
Right. The documents argue that China's answer is a final solution to neutralize the native population. The narrative flows directly from the motive for control to the method of control. And they explicitly map these actions to the 1948 UN Genocide Convention.
It is crucial to understand that genocide, in international legal terms, is rarely just spontaneous violence. It is a methodical, multi-layered process of erasure.
Yeah, and the sources detail every terrible layer of that machine, starting with physical elimination. They list massacres in cities like Urumqi and Barron, mass executions, and chilling allegations of industrial-scale human organ harvesting.
The details on that are incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, they point to the existence of a specific priority lane at the Kashgar airport labeled Special Passengers Human Organ Exportation Lane.
The logistics required to create a literal fast-pass lane at a commercial airport for harvested organs implies a bureaucratic normalization of atrocity that is, frankly, profoundly difficult to comprehend.
It's horrifying, but the violence is just the blunt instrument. The documents detail a massive infrastructure designed to inflict deep bodily and mental harm. We are talking about mass internment inside over 1,400 concentration camps.
Oh, 1,400.
They detail systemic torture and the use of sexual violence and rape, not just as rogue acts, but as state-sponsored tools to mentally and physically destroy the population.
It is the systemic breaking of the individual in order to break the community spirit.
Then you look at how they alter the conditions of life. This includes massive forced labor programs feeding the very tech, cotton, and solar industries we just talked about. They describe mass deportations of working-age Uyghur men to secret prisons deep inside China.
Because if you forcefully remove the working-age male population and isolate them from their families, you hollow out the society's ability to sustain itself economically or demographically.
Right, which ties directly into the demographic engineering the sources outline. The campaign to prevent births is aggressive. The sources claim there are widespread forced sterilizations, mandatory IUD insertions, and an estimated 3.7 million forced abortions between 1979 and 2009 alone.
It's a staggering figure.
On top of that, they detail state-sponsored, coerced marriages of Uyghur women to Han Chinese men.
That is a deliberate mathematical attempt to rewrite the genetic and cultural future of the region. By removing the Uyghur men and forcing the women into intermarriages, they are biologically assimilating the next generation.
And what happens to the children who are already born? Well, the documents state that by 2019, over 880,500 Uyghur and Turkic children had been forcibly taken from their families.
And put into the state system.
Yeah, they are placed in highly secured, state-run boarding schools where they undergo complete Hanification. They are forbidden to speak their native language. They are forced to eat pork, which violates their Islamic faith. They are militarized and conditioned to praise the very army that took their parents away.
It's total erasure.
And the sources also cite the destruction of 16,000 mosques and the systemic disappearance of Uyghur intellectuals and poets. There is this one quote from a Chinese official in the documents that stopped me cold.
Oh, the agriculture quote.
Yes. Explaining the mass internment, he compares it to agriculture, saying, you can't uproot all the weeds hidden among the crops you need to spray chemicals to kill them all.
This raises an important question, though. How does a population possibly survive that? I mean, when the persecution isn't a chaotic outburst, but a high-tech, highly organized machine. The mass surveillance state described here isn't just passively watching the population, it is actively dismantling the family unit and cultural memory. It is a slow, structural replacement of the East Turkistani identity with a Han Chinese identity.
It really feels impossible to withstand. You read through the sheer scale of the camps, the cameras, the biometric tracking, and it feels like total inevitable erasure. But the documents show that the identity and the governance of East Turkestan are actually surviving, just outside the physical borders.
Because you can occupy a territory, but you cannot easily eradicate an idea, especially when it is formally organized.
Exactly. Which brings us to the East Turkestan Republic's government in exile. According to the sources, it was established in Washington, D.C. on September 14, 2004.
Right.
They operate as the sole legitimate authority representing the East Turkestani people, and they have a fully fleshed out constitution.
It is a fascinating legal document. It is not just a symbolic gesture of defiance. It is a functioning framework for a nation.
It is incredibly rigorous. It outlines strict democratic rules, including a 7-member executive council, a parliament of up to 60 members elected by the global diaspora, and strict two-term limits of 4 years each for the president and the prime minister.
They are deliberately modeling the kind of transparent, democratic, rule of law state they aspire to build back home, contrasting it sharply with the authoritarian system currently occupying their land.
Yeah, and they are fierce about who gets to participate in this government. There are extremely strict anti-collaboration laws written right into the Constitution.
Yeah, you saw that too.
If you have ever collaborated with the occupying forces, or even held views contrary to the goal of full independence, you are permanently barred from serving in their parliament.
That speaks to the existential stakes they are operating under. There is absolutely no room for political compromise when you believe your nation is facing a literal genocide.
The documents go into such specific detail about their national symbols, too. The official language is Uyghur. The religion is Islam. The national flag is a striking blue with a white crescent and star. But the emblem is what really caught my eye.
It's very detailed.
It is. It has a crescent moon with exactly 9 beads on each side, representing the 9 Uyghur and 9 Oghuz historical tribes. In the center is Bismillah calligraphy. Above that are 3 stars, representing 3 historical Turkic states, the Kukturk, the Uyghur, and the Korakhanid. I'll be honest, those historical names are new to me.
Well, think of them as the foundational empires of Turkic civilization. The Kukturk, for instance, established one of the largest nomadic empires in the 6th century. By weaving these specific ancient states and the Oghuz tribes into the very fabric of their modern constitution, they are telling a story of uninterrupted historical continuity. They are stating clearly, we didn't just appear, we are the direct descendants of empires that ruled this land centuries before the current occupying power even existed.
Okay, that makes sense. Reading through this constitution, I don't know, it feels like, imagine you're looking at a blueprint for this magnificent, sprawling house.
It proves, organizationally, that the East Turkestani people maintain a distinct, legally structured national identity that is entirely separate from China. They are keeping the legal entity of the state breathing even while the physical territory is occupied.
We've gone on quite the intense journey today. We started with the map, unpacking the historical and legal arguments for East Turkestan's statehood and their rejection of being categorized as a colonized Chinese province.
Yeah?
We moved into the trillion-dollar strategic motivations, uncovering how this region serves as the geographical engine for global trade and natural resources. Then we explored the horrific details of the alleged genocide, tracing how the state's actions align with the international markers of demographic and cultural eradication.
For a lot to take in.
It is. And finally, we looked at the resilience of the exiled government, rigorously keeping the blueprint of their nation alive in the diaspora.
It is a heavy narrative, but it perfectly illustrates how history, economics, and human rights are inextricably linked.
And that linkage comes right to your front door, to you listening right now. Because East Turkestan is the linchpin of global supply chains for the cotton in your clothes, the solar energy panels on your roofs, and the polysilicon inside the electronics you use every single day. You are inadvertently connected to this region and to this conflict.
The global economy does not exist in a vacuum. The raw materials fueling our modern conveniences have an origin point and often a profound human cost.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to ponder long after this audio stops playing. If the modern global economy relies so heavily on the resources flowing out of East Turkestan, are the world's nations silently subsidizing the very occupation and erasure detailed in these documents just to keep their supply chains intact? Is the invisible price of a cheap screen or a fast fashion shirt the survival of a 6,400-year-old culture? It is something to think about the next time you plug in a device or look at a map and wonder what is really happening beneath the lines. Thank you for joining us on this heavy but vital deep dive. We'll be back soon to keep unpacking the world's most complex stories.